The surface of Aquarius Prime rippled with bioluminescent distress signals, visible even from high orbit. Ambassador Keela watched through her containment sphere as another massive harvester ship descended through the clouds, its angular shadow darkening the already dim waters of her homeworld. The Krax Empire's mining fleet had arrived 3 cycles ago, and they hadn't bothered with diplomatic pleasantries before beginning their systematic draining of Aquarius Prime's oceans. Honorable Council members, Keela's voice trembled as she addressed the holographic assembly of the Galactic Council for the 5th time this cycle. Our people are dying. The Krax harvesters have already drained 12% of our global ocean volume. Without intervention, my species will face extinction within 2 planetary rotations. The council chamber remained silent, save for the soft humming of environmental systems, maintaining the various atmospheric conditions required by its diverse membership. Ambassador Talak of the Silicon Confederation finally spoke, their crystalline form refracting light in patterns that indicated discomfort. While the Council sympathizes with the Sci-Fi situation, intervention would violate our principle of non-interference in resource acquisition disputes. The Krax Empire has filed all necessary permits for their harvesting operation. Permits. Keela's bioluminescent patterns flashed with incredulity. Our oceans are not a resource to be harvested. They are our home, our civilization, our very essence. We are a recognized sentient species, a fact which the Krax Empire acknowledges, interrupted Ambassador Vex of the Mechanical Collective, their optical sensors dimming slightly. They have offered to relocate your population to suitable aquatic habitats on one of their colony worlds. Keela's patterns shifted to deep indigo, a color of profound despair among her people. Our ocean contains the accumulated knowledge of 50,000 years of Sci-Fi civilization. The very chemical composition of our waters holds our history, our culture, our collective memory. We cannot simply be relocated. Then we suggest you negotiate more favorable terms with the Krax Empire. Talak responded. The Council cannot intervene in every territorial dispute that arises between species. As the Council members began to disconnect their feeds, Keela made one final desperate attempt. We have detected signals from a non-Council world, she announced. A species that calls themselves human. The humans. Ambassador Vex's interruption carried a note of dismissal. They are barely interstellar. Their technology is primitive. Their civilization fragmented. They have no standing in council matters. Nevertheless, Keela persisted, we intend to contact them. That would be inadvisable, Talak warned. The humans are unpredictable, emotional, and lack the sophisticated understanding of galactic politics required for such delicate matters. They might actually attempt to help you, which would only complicate the situation further. As the last holographic feeds winked out, Keela remained floating in her containment sphere, watching another harvester ship begin its devastating work. Her patterns shifted to a deep purple of determination as she activated the long-range communications array. The humans were indeed primitive by Council standards. Their ships still used reaction drives, their weapons were crude, and they hadn't even unified their planetary government. But Keela had studied their transmissions, their entertainment broadcasts, their historical records. They were different from the Council races. Where the Council saw resources, humans saw life. Where the Council demanded order, humans embraced chaos. Where the Council preached non-interference, humans helped. Begin transmission, she commanded, her patterns forming the complex shapes of ancient Sci-Fi script. To the species known as humans, I am Ambassador Keela of the Sci-Fi. Our world is dying, and we need your help. We have nothing to offer in return except our gratitude and friendship. The Galactic Council has abandoned us. You are our last hope. The message would take 14 standard days to reach Earth. The Krax harvesters would drain another 8% of their oceans in that time. But as Keela watched the message pulse out into the darkness of space, her patterns briefly flickered with a color she hadn't displayed in many cycles. Hope. Above her, the stars seemed to shimmer with possibility. Among them, somewhere, was a young species that hadn't yet learned to ignore the pleas of the desperate. A species that still believed in right and wrong, in helping those in need, in fighting impossible odds. A species that perhaps would remind the galaxy what it meant to be truly civilized. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the United Earth Council, her hand steady despite the weight of the moment. The holographic display behind her showed the swirling oceans of a distant world, now punctuated by massive harvester ships that looked like mechanical leeches against the blue expanse. "The Severi transmission is authentic," she declared, her voice echoing through the chambers in Geneva. "We've confirmed it through multiple verification protocols. Their world is being systematically drained by an advanced alien empire, and the Galactic Council has chosen to do nothing." Admiral James Rodriguez leaned forward, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic display. "What are their defensive capabilities?" "Minimal," Sarah replied. "The Severi are a peaceful species. Their technology focused on ocean management, environmental harmonization, and deep-sea architecture. They never developed weapons because they never imagined anyone would try to steal their oceans. And we're certain this isn't a trap." Council member Ibrahim asked, voicing the concern that hung in the air. "We've only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Getting involved in an interstellar conflict could be disastrous for Earth." Sarah's response was interrupted by Captain Maya Patel, who had been quietly analyzing tactical data at her station. "With respect, Council members, whether it's a trap or not is irrelevant. We're looking at the genocide of an entire civilization. The real question is, can we live with ourselves if we do nothing?" The chamber erupted in overlapping discussions until Council President Chen Lai raised his hand for silence. "Dr. Chen, what exactly are we capable of doing?" "The Krax Empire apparently has technology far beyond ours." Sarah smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. "That's where things get interesting. We've analyzed the Krax harvesting ships. They're incredibly advanced, yes, but also specialized. They're designed for efficient ocean extraction, not combat. Their defensive systems are primarily focused on environmental hazards, not military threats." "And more importantly," Maya added, bringing up new tactical displays, "they're overconfident. They're not even maintaining proper security formations. Why would they? No one in their experience would dare to challenge them." Admiral Rodriguez's eyes lit up with understanding. They've never faced humanity before. The next hour was a flurry of rapid-fire planning. Earth's military forces began mobilizing, but they weren't alone. As word spread of the Severi's plight, something unprecedented happened. Civilian ships began volunteering. Fishing trawlers offered to help transport Severi refugees. Deep-sea research vessels promised their expertise in underwater operations. Mining companies pledged their most advanced drilling ships, suggesting they could disrupt the Krax's harvesting operations. "This is madness," Council member Ibrahim muttered, watching the growing list of civilian volunteers. "We're talking about sending fishing boats against an alien empire." "No," Sarah corrected him. "We're talking about humanity standing up for what's right. And sometimes madness is exactly what's needed." The plan came together with remarkable speed. Earth's fastest ships would head out first, carrying a mix of military personnel and civilian experts. The slower vessels would follow, forming a support network for what might become a prolonged campaign. Scientists began adapting Earth's underwater warfare techniques for space combat. Engineers worked frantically to modify shipping containers into temporary aquatic habitats for potential Severi refugees. Within 48 hours, Operation Deep Guard was ready. The first wave of ships gathered in high Earth orbit. A motley fleet of military vessels, modified civilian ships, and hastily armed research vessels. Each ship carried a piece of Earth's oceans, a gesture of solidarity with the water-dwelling Severi. As Sarah prepared to board the command ship Magellan, she received a priority message from her deep space monitoring station. The Krax had accelerated their harvesting operations. They now had over 500 ships in the Severi system. "They know we're coming," Maya said, reading the data over Sarah's shoulder. "Good," Sarah replied, her jaw set with determination. "Then they can't say they weren't warned." The Magellan's engines flared to life, leading the first wave of humanity's response. Behind them, thousands more ships were being prepared as Earth's industries shifted into emergency production. Humanity had never been unified like this before. Not by war, not by disaster, not by any threat. But the thought of an entire civilization being slowly drained of their very existence had awakened something primal and powerful in the human spirit. As the fleet engaged their FTL drives, Sarah thought about Ambassador Keela's desperate message. The Sci-Fi had called humans primitive, emotional, and unpredictable. They had meant these as warnings, not realizing they were listing humanity's greatest strengths. The stars stretched into streaks of light as the fleet began its journey. They were primitive enough to still believe in right and wrong, emotional enough to care about strangers, and unpredictable enough to do something about it. The Krax Empire was about to learn why the Galactic Council had been right to worry about human intervention, just not for the reasons they thought. The Krax commander's mandibles clicked in amusement as his sensors detected the approaching human fleet. Their ships were crude, their formations irregular, and their weapons primitive by galactic standards. He had expected the Galactic Council to perhaps send a strongly worded protest, but this, a ragtag fleet of barely spacefaring primitives. "Signal from the lead human vessel, Commander," his communications officer reported. "Put it through. Let's hear what these primitives have to say." Admiral Rodriguez's voice filled the Krax command center. "This is Admiral James Rodriguez of the United Earth Fleet. You are engaged in the unauthorized extraction of a sovereign species homeworld. Cease operations immediately and withdraw from Sci-Fi space." The commander's crystalline eyes flickered with mirth. "You have no authority here, human. The Krax Empire has filed all necessary permits with the Galactic Council. This is a legitimate resource acquisition operation. Those permits are hereby revoked." The transmission cut off, and the commander's amusement turned to confusion as his tactical display erupted with warnings. The human fleet had suddenly split into dozens of smaller groups, each taking seemingly random trajectories toward his harvester ships. "Deploying countermeasures," his tactical officer announced. "Standard procedure for dealing with primitive missiles and projectile weapons." But the humans hadn't launched any weapons. Instead, hundreds of small objects dispersed from their ships, spreading out in a complex pattern that his sensors couldn't quite track. They were too small to be weapons, too numerous to be ships. "Sir," his science officer's voice carried an edge of panic. "They're releasing terrestrial oceanic life forms into space." "What?" The tactical display showed the truth. The humans had released thousands of Earth's deep-sea creatures, each protected in a small containment field. Jellyfish, squids, and other creatures that had evolved to thrive in the crushing pressures of Earth's oceans now drifted through space, their bioluminescence creating a chaotic pattern that played havoc with Krax targeting systems. Before the commander could process this bizarre tactic, the real attack began. Earth's military vessels surged forward, using the bioluminescent chaos as cover. But instead of engaging at range with conventional weapons, they dove straight for the harvester ships. "They're ramming us," the tactical officer said in disbelief. But they weren't ramming. The human ships locked onto the harvester's massive intake valves, the points where they drew in the Sci-Fi's precious oceans. From each Earth vessel, teams of humans in deep-sea diving suits emerged, carrying equipment that looked suspiciously like modified oil rig tools. "Impossible," the commander muttered. "No species fights like this. No one would risk their lives in space using underwater equipment." But that was exactly what the humans were doing. They had recognized that the harvester's intake systems were designed to process water, and had brought Earth's centuries of underwater engineering experience to bear. Within minutes, dozens of harvesters reported catastrophic internal flooding as the humans reversed their own extraction systems against them. "Sir, the civilian vessels are fishing." Indeed, the converted Earth fishing ships had deployed enormous nets in space, tangling the harvester's external sensors and communication arrays. Research vessels used sonic pulses calibrated to the same frequencies as Earth's whales, creating confusion in the harvester's sensitive acoustic detection systems. This isn't warfare, the commander raged. This is madness. Sir, his tactical officer interrupted, the Sevari. They're helping the humans. The oceans of Aquarius Prime had come alive. The Sevari were manipulating their world's currents to create massive whirlpools beneath the harvesters, disrupting their stability. Bioluminescent patterns rippled through the depths in sequences that perfectly complemented the chaos created by marine life, further confounding Crack's targeting systems. A new signal came through, this time from Dr. Sarah Chen. Commander, you're about to learn something important about humanity. We don't just fight wars, we solve problems. You saw our technology and assumed we were primitive. But we've been fighting our own oceans for millennia, learning their secrets, developing tools to work in the most hostile environments our world offers. And now we're going to use every bit of that knowledge to stop you. The commander watched in horror as more human ships emerged from FTL, these carrying massive underwater drilling platforms modified for space operations. They weren't here to fight his fleet. They were here to shut down his operation by any means necessary, using techniques and technologies his forces had never trained to resist. Sir, his second-in-command ventured cautiously, perhaps we should consider withdrawing to reassess the situation. The commander's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed this suggestion. His forces were in disarray, their carefully planned harvesting operation disrupted by tactics no military simulator could have predicted. Half his ships were compromised by what amounted to underwater mining and fishing equipment adapted for space warfare. And behind the chaos, he could see more human ships arriving. Hundreds more. Each undoubtedly carrying some new, insane adaptation of terrestrial technology that his forces weren't prepared to counter. Begin evacuation procedures, he ordered finally, and send word to High Command. Tell them we need new protocols. The humans don't fight like anyone else. As his fleet began its withdrawal, the commander watched the humans beginning efforts to stabilize the Sevari's disrupted oceans. They had won without defeating his military might. They had won by simply refusing to fight the way they were supposed to. The humans had proven themselves to be more than primitive. They were something far more dangerous. They were innovative. The Crack's high command didn't take their defeat lightly. 3 days after the initial human victory, their main battle fleet arrived at Aquarius Prime. Not harvesters this time, but warships. Real warships, bristling with weapons that made Earth's most advanced technology look like children's toys. Captain Maya Patel stood on the bridge of the Magellan, watching the massive Crack's dreadnoughts emerge from FTL. Their ships formed a perfect combat sphere around the planet, a display of military precision that made their earlier harvesting operation look amateurish in comparison. They're not here to harvest anymore, Admiral Rodriguez said quietly. They're here to make an example of us. The Crack's transmission was brief. Surrender the Sevari world or be destroyed. They gave Earth's fleet 1 hour to withdraw. In the Magellan's main conference room, Earth's command staff gathered for what might be their final strategy session. The holographic display showed the brutal truth. They were outgunned, outmatched, and trapped between the Crack's fleet and the world they had sworn to protect. The civilian ships need to withdraw. Admiral Rodriguez declared. There's no sense in. No. The voice came from Anna Rossi, captain of the converted fishing vessel Marina's Hope. Her face appeared on one of the conference screens, along with dozens of other civilian captains. We knew the risks when we volunteered. We're not leaving. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had been quietly studying data from their earlier engagement, suddenly straightened. Captain Rossi is right. We're not leaving, and I think I know how we can win this. Win? Rodriguez looked at the tactical display again. Sarah, I know we managed to surprise them last time, but these aren't harvesters. These are warships with crews trained for combat. Exactly. Sarah said, her eyes lighting up. They're trained for combat. Standard combat, which means they have standard combat weaknesses. She turned to Ambassador Keela's holographic form, floating in her containment sphere. Ambassador, you said the Severi oceans contain your civilization's memory. Yes, Keela's patterns shifted in confusion. Our waters hold the chemical and electromagnetic signatures of our history, our collective knowledge. Your electromagnetic signatures, Sarah interrupted. Can they be amplified? Understanding dawned in Keela's patterns. You want to turn our entire ocean into a weapon. The next 50 minutes were a blur of desperate preparation. Every Earth ship, military and civilian, began modifying their equipment according to Sarah's calculations. The Severi coordinated with their entire population, preparing to channel their ocean's electromagnetic signals in ways they never had before. When the Cracks' ultimatum expired, their fleet moved to attack positions, but before they could fire, the oceans of Aquarius Prime began to glow. 50,000 years of Severi civilization, every thought, memory, and emotion stored in their waters, burst forth in a synchronized electromagnetic pulse. The Earth fleet's modified equipment amplified and focused the signal, turning the planet's entire ocean into what amounted to the largest EMP weapon ever created. The Cracks' fleet's advanced technology worked against them. Their complex neural networks and sophisticated AI systems overloaded, trying to process 50 millennia of alien thoughts and memories all at once. Ships began to drift, their crews overwhelmed by the flood of Severi consciousness pouring through their neural interfaces. But the victory came at a terrible cost. The electromagnetic surge damaged or destroyed nearly half of Earth's fleet. The Severi oceans, forced to release centuries of stored energy all at once, began to destabilize. And the Cracks, though defeated, had managed to launch a final salvo of missiles before their systems failed. All ships, defensive positions, Rodriguez ordered, but he knew it was too late. The missiles were too numerous, their targeting too precise. That's when Marina's Hope and dozens of other civilian vessels broke formation. The fishing ships, research vessels, and converted cargo carriers placed themselves directly in the missile's path, sacrificing themselves to protect the military ships that still had functioning weapons. Get those crack ships disabled now, Maya shouted, watching in horror as the civilian ships were torn apart. Don't let their sacrifice be for nothing. The next few minutes would be remembered in human history as both a tragedy and a triumph. Earth's remaining military vessels, protected by the civilian fleet's sacrifice, managed to disable or destroy most of the paralyzed Cracks warships. The Severi, their oceans still reeling from the electromagnetic surge, worked desperately to stabilize their environment. When the chaos finally subsided, the space around Aquarius Prime was littered with debris from both sides. The Cracks' fleet lay dead in space, their crews unconscious or confused, their advanced systems paralyzed by the lingering effects of the Severi consciousness weapon. But the true cost became clear as they counted the civilian ships lost in the final defense. Marina's Hope, the Pacific Explorer, the Shanghai Venture, dozens of vessels crewed by ordinary people who had chosen to fight not for glory or duty, but simply because it was right. Maya stood at the Magellan's viewport, watching recovery ships searching for survivors among the wreckage. They'll come back, she said quietly. The Cracks. They'll want revenge for this humiliation. Let them come, Rodriguez replied, his voice heavy with emotion. And when they do, they'll find that humanity remembers its heroes. We'll be ready. In the waters below, the Severi began their songs of mourning and gratitude, their bioluminescent patterns telling the story of human courage for future generations. They had witnessed something remarkable. A young species willing to sacrifice everything not for profit or power, but for the simple belief that helping others was worth any cost. The galaxy was about to change. The age of cold calculation and political maneuvering was over. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, not as conquerors or merchants, but as defenders of the defenseless. And they had proven that sometimes the strongest weapons weren't weapons at all, but the simple courage to stand up for what was right. 1 year after the Battle of Aquarius Prime, Ambassador Keela stood before the Galactic Council again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Dr. Sarah Chen stood beside her containment sphere, along with representatives from a dozen other species who had previously been too afraid to challenge the Council's policies. The Council chamber had changed too. Scorch marks still mirrored one wall, a reminder of the day 3 months ago, when a group of human environmental scientists had stormed the chamber, demanding changes to the resource acquisition laws. They had been arrested, of course, but their actions had sparked something unprecedented: debate. The motion before the council today, Keela announced, her patterns bright with confidence, is to establish the Mutual Defense and Cultural Preservation Act. No longer will we stand idle while civilizations are destroyed in the name of resource acquisition. This is unnecessary, Ambassador Vex of the Mechanical Collective protested. The Krax Empire has already agreed to cease their oceanic harvesting operations. They agreed because they had no choice, Sarah responded. After their defeat at Aquarius Prime, 17 other water-bearing worlds formed defensive pacts with Earth. The Krax knew their harvesting days were over. But this session wasn't really about the Krax. It was about something far more profound that had begun stirring in the galaxy. The humans called it empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. It was a concept that many council species had dismissed as primitive, an evolutionary weakness that advanced civilizations should overcome. Yet here they were, watching as more and more young species began following Earth's example. The Ventari, a silicon-based species like the Severi's first defenders, had begun offering sanctuary to endangered crystalline life forms. The Meridian Alliance, inspired by Earth's civilian volunteers, had established a rapid response force for ecological disasters. The galaxy is changing, Keela continued. The Severi remember what it means to stand alone, crying out for help that never comes. But we also remember what it means when someone finally answers that cry. The humans taught us that civilization isn't measured by technological advancement or economic efficiency. It's measured by how we treat those in need. Sarah stepped forward, activating a holographic display. It showed the memorial garden that now orbited Aquarius Prime, a space station containing sealed aquatic chambers, each preserving a portion of Earth's oceans in honor of the civilian ships lost in the battle. The Severi tended these waters as sacred spaces, incorporating their chemical signatures into their own historic memory. "We're not here to fight you," Sarah addressed the council. "We're here to remind you of something you've forgotten. Every species in this chamber was once like us, young, passionate, believing they could make the galaxy better. Somewhere along the way, you decided that efficiency was more important than compassion, that order mattered more than justice." She gestured to the representatives behind her. "But look around. Look how many have come today to support this motion. Not because Earth forced them, not because they fear us, but because we reminded them of who they used to be, who they can be again." The debate lasted for 3 days. Old alliances crumbled and new ones formed. Species that had been political enemies for centuries found themselves voting together, inspired by the simple idea that helping others wasn't just right. It was necessary for true civilization to exist. When the final vote was tallied, the Mutual Defense and Cultural Preservation Act passed by a margin that shocked even its supporters. But the real victory wasn't in the legislation. It was in the conversations that happened afterward, as species began sharing stories of their own histories, their own struggles, their own moments of needed help that never came. The Severi's oceans had stabilized, now richer than ever with the added memories of human sacrifice and triumph. The Krax Empire, humbled by their defeat, had begun reforms that would have been unthinkable a year ago. And Earth, despite its losses, had gained something precious: hope for a better galaxy. In the years that followed, historians would mark the Battle of Aquarius Prime as the moment when everything changed. Not because of the military victory, but because it showed the galaxy another way. Humanity had proved that being advanced didn't mean becoming cold, that civilization didn't have to lose its heart to progress. As Keela and Sarah left the council chamber, they passed a group of young representatives from various species, deep in discussion about forming their own mutual aid alliance. Keela's patterns shifted to a color she had learned from studying human art, sunrise orange, the color of new beginnings. They said humans were too primitive to understand galactic politics, she said to Sarah. They were right, in a way. We had made politics too complex, too removed from what really matters. Sometimes it takes a primitive heart to remind us of fundamental truths. Sarah smiled, watching the young representatives. Their species had been enemies once, before Earth showed them another way. We're all primitive at something, she said. Humans might be primitive at space travel and advanced technology, but maybe we're advanced at remembering what matters most. Above them, through the council chamber's transparent dome, the stars seemed brighter somehow, each one holding worlds full of possibilities, lives waiting to be defended, civilizations waiting to remember who they really were. The galaxy was changing, one primitive, emotional, unpredictable human idea at a time. And it was changing for the better.